Well, good morning, everyone, and good morning to this meeting subcommittee of licensing to look at an application for an extension of premises at the Crown of Pantycelli in Abergavenny. I'm Tudor Thomas. I'm chair of this committee, and I will obviously direct the committee as we go through today. I'm also a councillor for Park in Abergavenny, and obviously that's why I'm actually on the committee. We'll go around first and introduce everybody, and it's obviously going to be slightly different in that some people will be on Teams on screen, and obviously some people are physically in the room. So I'm Tudor Thomas, chair of the committee.
Yeah, Julian Sanders, solicitor for Monmouthshire Council.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services, Monmouthshire County Council.
Go to licensing, please.
Lindro Gorman, Principal Licensing Officer.
Emma Watkins, Licensing Officer.
Hugh Owen, Principal Environmental Health Officer.
Nicholas Clayson, Fort Director of the Crown.
Amy Norville, Landlady Director of the Crown of Pantycelli.
And we'll go on to screen. We go to the councillors first. We go to Councillor Dale Rook.
Hi, I'm Councillor Dale Rook, representing Chepstow Castle and Larkfield Ward, and also a member of this committee.
Alistair.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Alistair Neal for Gobi and Vara Ward, and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
And then we go to a person who's objecting to this application for a licence. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Hello, we're Alison and Ian Horton, and we're sort of neighbours of the Crown.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll now go to the sort of procedure and just explain briefly. Obviously, the application's been made by the applicant, and obviously at a point today in the meeting, you'll obviously have an opportunity to address the meeting and to put your point of view. The norm is that you are allowed approximately 10 minutes to put your point of view, but in terms of being fair, if it goes very slightly over, I'm not going to be too harsh in terms of time. But 10 minutes is quite a long time to be able to to put your point of view. Obviously, licensing will address the issue. The two officers in front of me, and as well the objectors in terms of Hugh Owen, who's the Chief Environmental Health Officer, but covers the area that your public house is situated in. And obviously we've got the two objectors online. And when we've gone through the procedure, and we've gone through the application, and everybody's put their point of view, and there will be opportunity for particularly the two councillors online to ask questions, and I would remind councillors and myself that any issues that we have, we need to raise them in this forum, in the public part of the meeting. And obviously, MCC solicitor will give advice to the panel, but we will retire to another separate room, and then we will discuss the application, make a decision, and provide reasons and rationale for that decision, and we'll come back then, and that I will give the decision, and my colleague here from the legal department will give the reasons and rationale for that decision, and so that you are absolutely clear then, why we've made the decision and the reasons backing it up. If at any time as applicants or anybody else, if you're unsure about the procedure or the tech even, then obviously feel free to ask for help, and don't in any way be sort of overfaced by being in the chamber here, etc. I'm sure you won't be, but if there are any issues, then obviously feel free to ask. So we'll now go to licensing officer colleagues, and they will give a summary of the application. Thanks.
Excuse me, Chair. Should we deal with agenda items 1 and 2 first?
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, jumping the gun. Firstly then, any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
None. Any declarations of interest? None. And then we'll go to the application and to the licensing officers. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Williams.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I won't go through the procedure because obviously the Chair has summed up that. First point, when you speak, if you press your mic, you see the long button at the bottom there to speak, and then put it back off as soon as you speak, so that everybody can hear what you say, and it sort of zooms in on you as well then, okay? Before we begin, are you happy to proceed today without any legal representation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. I'll pass you over to Emma Watkins, the licensed officer. She'll go through the report, and then we'll do the procedure, as the Chair mentioned, listen to the objectors first, and then obviously you can give your views as well. Emma will also refer to additional documentation that has been submitted to the committee with regard of support of your application as well, so she'll refer to those extra documents. Okay.
Thank you. So the purpose today is to consider the application to vary the current premise licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for the Crown of Pantegethli, Abergavenny. It is recommended that members consider and determine the application referred to in 3.1 of the report. The application to vary the current premises licence was received from Mr Nicholas Clayton Ford of the Crown Pantegethli. The licence is to include a grassed area referred to as the lawned area in the application to the rear of the premises. The licensable activities for that area will be the same as what is on the current licence. So that will be alcohol, which would be supplied between the hours of 11 a.m. and midnight, recorded music, which would be between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. On 30 occasions per annum, providing 7 days' notice is given to the police. This can be extended by 1 hour to midnight. Live music is already included for the outside area under the current licence because of the Live Music Act. In response to that, the application was put out to consultation. We received 2 objections, one from Principal Environmental Health Officer Hugh Owen and another from Mr and Mrs Horton. In support of your application and in response to the objections, you have submitted some documents. I have received a copy of a petition with 221 signatures on. I've had 2 letters of support from neighbouring properties, one from Mrs Lynn Bishop of Triley Court Holiday Cottages and another from Katie Smith of Lower House Farm. I've also received an email from Councillor Malcolm Lane and a letter from Senedd member Peter Fox, to which I responded to Senedd member and to Malcolm Lane, Councillor Malcolm Lane. So I'll now hand over to the objectors so that they can put their comments forward. Mr Owen?
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present and explain my representations as set out in Appendix F of the report and also paragraph 3.7. My team in environmental health consider such premises variation applications primarily from the prevention of public nuisance perspective. This is in line with our role and experience of dealing with noise nuisance complaints on behalf of the local authority. My comments dated the 5th of December 2024, as I said, are in Appendix F, but in essence, the key points of my concerns are as follows. There are a number of dwellings in fairly close proximity. The closest, Gechley Dowell, which shares a boundary with the Crown, is approximately 70 metres from the proposed marquee. The hamlet of Pantigechley is semi-rural in nature, and the background sound levels are likely to be predominantly quite low, especially during evening hours. The variation as it stands before us asks to vary licensable activities, including live and recorded music outside until late at night. As the licensing officer explained, this would include on 30 occasions to a midnight, 30 occasions per year to midnight with the agreement of the police. Marquee functions would enable activities such as wedding receptions, and generally come with an expectation that music would be at a reasonable level to entertain guests. Guest satisfaction clearly will be key. From my experience of investigating noise complaints over a number of years, I am concerned that music at such a level, at this location, can be anticipated and would particularly be considered loud and impactful at the gardens and inside the nearby dwellings. Additional factors which I think merit consideration. The spring and summer period is when gardens are in use and windows are open for summer cooling. Cumulative impact needs to be considered. In my experience, neighbours, residents generally tolerate some level of inconvenience and disturbance, understanding that they live next door to a public house. But when that becomes a regular pattern, then their threshold tends to become lower. Another key point I feel is that there's no significant history of such events at this particular location on the Lawn area to give us some precedent and confidence that what is proposed will not cause significant issues. In other words, the suitability of this lawn area hasn't been tested, for example, through temporary event notices. So the key points: nearby dwellings, semi-rural in area, the context is quiet. Late evening hours has been requested. Anticipation of music levels that would be needed for guest satisfaction, and indeed the raised voices and chatter from 50 to 100 people. We're talking about summer months, cumulative impact, and our experience of dealing with noise complaints arising at locations such as this. So therefore, I think it's reasonable to ask for these matters to be carefully considered and evaluated in a noise impact assessment. We don't ask for such assessments lightly and understand that they can be costly because they need to be prepared by a person with appropriate acoustic qualifications. Just to be clear, what I would expect a noise impact assessment to consider is the noise at source. What noise level, what music level is going to be played at source. To consider the background levels. What are the background levels during evening hours on Friday, Saturday nights when it's likely that the marquee and functions would be held? And then to predict that noise from the source that can be expected at the receiver. So that, in effect, is what a noise impact assessment we would expect to include. And it is, I should point out to the committee, it is quite distinct to a noise management plan. A noise management plan a noise impact assessment will predict noise levels, predict impact, and a noise management plan will follow looking at mitigation. I should point out that I would similarly ask for such a noise impact assessment if a number of days of use or the marquee required planning permission and exceeded the 28-day allowance, which I understand exists in planning law. One final point with regards to noise impact assessments, we regularly get asked what is okay, what is acceptable, what does the law say that's acceptable? And of course, the law does not, there are no standards which we can point to and say, well, this amount of disturbance is acceptable. Because consideration of impact is all about local context, which varies, whether or not it's a town centre location or a rural area, to what is being requested. And ultimately, this is why we have licensing committee to consider the local context. So those are the key points for me, and thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll now go to the... there are no other responsible authorities objecting. We'll go now then to the other persons who have made representation to the panel. So if we go on screen now then, and if you go to Mr. and Mrs. Houghton, thanks.
Yeah, hi, morning.
Morning. Thanks for this opportunity to share our thoughts on the application put in by Nick and Amy. We'd just like to also say that the word objection is quite difficult for us, because we're not objecting to an extension of Nick and Amy's business. They're doing a great job at the pub, and you know, they've really made it warm and hospitable, and they've done a fantastic job since they've been there. This application has actually put us in quite a difficult position, because we are not neighbours directly. We are actually a mile away across the valley, but by some quirk of geography, the noise from music from the pub travels directly across the valley and into our garden, and sometimes into our house. And we have the misfortune that the entirety of our garden faces in that direction, and most of our living accommodation, most of our rooms also face that way. So when music is played outside at the Crown, it hits us, and we can't get away from it. And for us, it feels very unreasonable that, having gone to the trouble of buying a house that is not directly near any main source of noise, we're still suffering noise from a pub across the valley. We have raised the issue of noise control with Nick and Amy already, because Sunday afternoon music has intruded into our garden and our house in the past year. And they have made efforts to reduce the noise levels, turn speakers away from our direction, and we're really appreciative of the efforts that they've made. But our concern is now that for weddings and other events, music is likely to be louder. It may be that the location of music on the rear lawn doesn't affect us as much as the current music, which is at the front of the pub in the front beer garden. And it could be that what Nick has said in one of his responses is right, and that the sound at the rear of the property would for us be deadened by the existence of the building, the Crown itself, sort of buffering between us and the music. But we can't be sure of that. And for us, we thought hard about putting this objection in at all, because for us, this is the only opportunity to be included in the process, I suppose, and be given some consideration in terms of noise impact assessments and noise management. So we thought it was important that we just made our concerns clear at this stage. So we support everything that Mr. Owen has said in terms of noise impact assessment, and we would just ask that any assessment also considers the impact of sound over a longer distance, because, as we said, by some quirk of geography, it's almost as though the sound is being funneled down the valley into our garden. So I think that's all we wanted to say. Thank you for your time. And again, to Nick and Amy, I'm really sorry that we've had to make this objection. Not something that we wanted to do, but we felt it was important just to make our points. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you for your input, and very much appreciate that, and coming in online to actually make it in person. In terms of admissible sort of written representations, obviously Mr and Mrs Houghton have submitted a written objection or set out their concerns. But as was stated earlier, we have a letter from Mrs Lynn Bishop from Triley Court Holiday Cottages in support. There is a letter from the Senedd member, Mr Peter Fox, who's visited and is supportive, and there is an email from Councillor Malcolm Lane, who again has met with the applicants at the premises, the Crown of Pantegylly, in connection with this application, and he does not raise any objections. He says he cannot see any valid objection to this variation of the licence, which would incorporate land at the rear of the premises, which is some considerable distance from any private dwelling houses. So there are 3 letters or communications in support. Did you say?
Sorry, Chair, if I can just add, I received an email from Nick and Amy last night, and it's it's an email basically from Katie Smith in support. She lives at Lower House Farm, but it was submitted late, so I didn't have a chance to circulate to everyone. Thank you.
So with that in mind, Chair, all parties would have received the additional information prior to the one last night. So if all parties are happy with that additional sort of information, do you want to read out what it says on the thing? So if all parties are happy with this submission today, if not, it can be sort of disregarded.
If Emma reads it out, then that would be helpful.
So the email was received at 20:48 last night, and it says, to whom it may concern, I'm writing to support the application being made by the Crown of Pantegylly for a variation in their licence. This will hopefully ensure the continued success of the business as a pub for local residents and when operating as a function space, creating new business opportunities for both the pub itself and other local businesses in Abergavenny and the surrounding area. As a provider of holiday accommodation, new business opportunities in the area are to be welcomed, and is signed Katie Smith.
Right, thank you for that. So, we've obviously had hard copies of the other letters, emails in support, and obviously you've had that written out. It obviously came in too late for it to be distributed last night. So we go now then to the applicants, and obviously, as I said earlier, you have 10 minutes, but there is possibility of slightly more time. You've got 10 minutes really to put your point of views. Obviously, you've heard the objections and the letters in support, but now obviously it's your turn to put your point of view in terms of your business case, etc., for this application. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for coming today and hearing us out. I just want to say the idea for this variation of licence came about following the November 5th budget. So I spent 36 hours working out what it meant for the Crown of Pantegylly, and roughly it causes us about a 56,000 deficit with our current staffing levels at the pub to maintain the employees that we've got, to maintain their consistent hours that they do. We've got 37 staff at the Crown of Pantegylly. We run a business that's open 7 days a week. We offer all-day dining. We evolve our business to manage the weather situations. Whether it be a nice day, we will do the pizza oven outside. We're very proactive in our approach. So when we worked out that we had a 56,000 deficit, and we don't make that sort of profit at the pub because we're growing. We've been there for just over 2.5 years now, so we're continuing to just evolve our business and grow our staff and strengthen our business model. However, 56,000's nothing to it's a lot of money. So. My background has always been hospitality, over 20 years now in hospitality. Some of that time was running events on Hamilton Island in the Whitsundays. I've probably operationally managed over 100 weddings in my time, and that coincides with my lovely wife next to me, who's the landlady, who for a considerable amount of time on Hamilton Island was the senior wedding planner, who also planned over 100 weddings. So myself and Ames have got the skill set and the knowledge to responsibly manage and operate weddings. And I just wanted to, Hugh over here, you're saying 50 to 100 people. That's not what we want. And I sat with Emma at the pub, and I said, we don't want the big weddings. If people want the big weddings, they can go to Sugarloaf Barns up the road and have a big party like. We're trying to offer the 10 to 30 weddings, because that's pretty much how much room the lawn area up the top will allow for. So we're not wanting that. It's not our desire to have massive party-like weddings. As I said, if they want that, they can go up to Sugarloaf Barns, or they can go and have a fancy wedding at Sandfried House. We're catering for that in between. Probably people that it's their second wedding and they don't want the big party. They just want the smaller events, because that's what we can cater for. We're not going to go out of our way to do the big weddings that we can't cater for. In response to Alison, I think Alison's made that point clear. Like when we did the music outside, she just goes, "Can't you take it to the back?" And I said, well, we can't in that, but we promise we won't do music past 8 p.m. for you. And we'll do everything. Like she said, we move the speakers in. If we have a drum kit, we make sure that the pads are on top of the drum kits so that it baffles the noise. That's what we ask the musicians to do. So we're very receptive to these when people do put in their concerns. But taking it an extra 130 metres past the pub, behind the pub, will add as a sound buffer for Alison. So I doubt she will have any concerns if and when we do are able to perform wedding receptions. But it's not just wedding receptions we're talking about, guys, but that seems to be the main point. It's not just wedding receptions. We know we can responsibly manage them, but we're talking like, a Christmas market up on the lawn, just a way for us to diversify our offering, to be able to create that extra turnover and extra gross profit, to be able to manage the current economic climate with hospitality. People who rely on employees to serve the food, to cook the food, to pour the pint. 4.8% increase in national insurance contributions, 6.9% increase in minimum wage. That doesn't just affect the minimum wage people. Everyone above that feels like they deserve a 6.9% increase as well, and we believe that too. So we need to manage that, and we need to be able to find a way to be able to create growth. Like we can't force people to come into our restaurant. So we need to work out a way to be able to create another source of turnover. Hugh, we had a conversation. It didn't go brilliant. I understand on the Friday we were in London. You came to the pub. I had no idea that you were coming to the pub, so it didn't give me it didn't give me the opportunity to be able to give some narrative to the project, and that's caused this report where you're talking 50 to 100, whereas fortunately, I had a meeting with Emma, and I said what sort of business model we were looking for up there, and that I was happy to have a temporary license just to prove that we could responsibly manage these events. And if we can't responsibly manage events, then it gets rejected. But we just wanted the opportunity. You've asked for a noise impact assessment. However, when we spoke on the phone, you said, I want an acoustic, I'd like an acoustic report, but I don't feel there's any point because you won't give me the readings that I feel it's just not going to work. Those were your words. You said it's not going to work. So we don't want to spend the money on doing an acoustic report when you've already said verbally over the phone that it won't give me any clarity in doing that. Those were your words. I will also say, from a common sense point of view, is that my front and rear beer garden are both licensed for live and recorded music and alcohol sales, and they're 3 metres away from my neighbours. Both sides, 3 metres away. And we haven't had any objections from either of those parties, or have we had objections from Geffley Dowell, which is behind the property. And they all visit the pub. And Geffley Dowell, again, they are 80 metres away from the lawned area. And when I had the opportunity, and thank you for your time again, Emma, on that day, when we went up there, I said, we'll manage it. We'll make sure the speakers are in the back left-hand corner, and we'll face them towards the northeastern bank, which is protected by a great big 2-storey barn and probably about 7-metre high bank, so the topography allows for a bit of sound barrier there. And we've got the tools and we've got the knowledge to be able to responsibly manage these events. And we don't want the big events. We don't want them.
So just to reiterate what Nick said, we know what we're capable of. We have a vast amount of experience, but we're not being silly here. We know that we will perform best with smaller scale events. Hugh, you mentioned that there was no significant history. Well, we ourselves got married on the property a year and a half ago, and it was very much the style of what we would like to offer to future couples. So basically, we used that lawn area, and we had our wedding ceremony there. We had canapes on that lawn area afterwards, and then we took the reception itself down into the front beer garden. Now, it was 40 people, but as Nick said, we actually have the right to use that front beer garden. So if this objection stands in our way, then we do have every right to still hold those ceremonies up the top and replicate what we did for our own wedding, bringing those wedding receptions down into the front beer garden. And to our mind, Mr. and Mrs. Horton, that's going to affect you far, far more, and it's going to affect so many more neighbours if we were forced to do it that way. We don't want to upset people and do that, but that is currently an option to us that sits within, our permitted licensing. I'd also just like to say that from a personal perspective, we've got a 4-year-old daughter. We don't want to attract a vast amount of noise, a vast amount of people that would not allow for a nice family environment, which is what we manage to currently achieve at the pub. That is the last thing that we want. So we certainly wouldn't be going out of our way to have a party atmosphere. And also, and just going back to when we do host live music currently, it's a family event. It's always over before 8 o'clock. There was one exception to that rule back at our anniversary party where it did go up until 9, but anyone who was there would tell you that Nick and I were on, sort of tenterhooks, just sort of, you've got to wrap it up, it's 9 o'clock, because we are concerned about our neighbours, and it's important to us to ensure that we're making people happy and that we are a family environment where, we're just creating a sociable atmosphere, within all the right parameters. That's our main objection here, our main intent here. As I said, we took the pub over 2.5 years ago. At the time, we had about 20 staff. So we've increased, we've improved the business by about 68% currently. However, we know that since we took over the business, we had the energy price rises to begin with, then we had the cost of goods price increases, and now we've got the increase to employee costs. So even though we've grown that business 68%, that 68% has been eaten up in either us reinventing the business. We built the summer house called Skirrid Views to the front of the building to offer us more dining space and to be able to do events like yoga, pottery, art classes. But, that costs a lot of money, and thankfully we've had support from Development Bank of Wales and NatWest to be able to allow us to continue growing. But this growth that we're putting forward for the weddings is not growth. It's just to survive. It's to survive. Bar and Keepers Institute, folks, 324 pubs closed their door in January. For good. For the first time ever in UK and Scotland, in England and Wales and Scotland, the number of pubs has gone under 39,000. And of those 39,000, just over 7,500 remain dormant, waiting for a landlord to take over the lease. So, it's tough right now. Wye Valley have had to do 8 uninstalls between Bromyard and Abergavenny. So that's 8 just between Hereford and Abergavenny. So, it's not easy out there. And all we ask for, as I said to Emma, we're not asking for, don't give us a permanent license that can never be taken away. Just look at maybe a temporary. Just give us 5 or 6 events to be able to prove that we can responsibly manage them. And sorry, just on that, I know, Hugh, before now you suggested, why don't we just put in a 10, whenever we require it, but just from a wedding perspective, that wouldn't work for us, because if we're having a conversation with a couple and they want to lock in a date, we obviously need to take a deposit at that point in time. Now, if that date is okay by us, but then we go out and seek the 10 and it gets disapproved, then that would be so embarrassing, and it's not a sustainable business model for us to then go back to the couple and say, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't granted. So, like Nick said, by all means, temporary, but we just need to know that we've got it secured for a specific period of time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I know you're referring to a temporary licence, and because this is a variation of your existing licence, if you went down the route of saying you would want it for a temporary period of time, that would impact your existing licence because you're varying that. What you could have done is had a new licence application, because you have more than one licence on a premises. So you could have had a temporary licence for just your area that you're doing the variation on, and retain another licence for your existing licence you have now. So if you went down the temporary route, Chair, it would mean it could impact, because what would happen is when the temporary licence ends, they would have to do an application for the whole pub and the beer garden. So that's something to consider, all right, on that before you go out to deliver it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you for that, Diolch yn fawr. Any questions now from the 2 elected members who obviously make up the committee with myself, just before we get to sort of concluding remarks, we then go in, as I say, to a private session to actually make the decision. So any issues from Councillor Rook or Councillor Alistair Neil?
Sorry, Chair, I'm raising my hand.
hasn't come through with us, but yeah, go carry on.
Sorry. Yeah. So basically, thank you for the information that's been provided. I was interested in any impact for cars when there might be an event taking place, and whether parking or the disruption that could be caused by cars in that area had been considered, and if so, what the conclusions might be. Thank you.
Carry on.
So since we took over the pub 2.5 years ago, we've extended the car park twice over. So that's allowed for an extra 22 cars to reside in the car park. And as I said to Emma, for us to successfully be able to manage a wedding, we would need to limit the amount of diners in our pub. And the reason why that would work better for us is because we've worked out that the gross profit on such a function on the top lawned area is more than the gross profit of diners in the restaurant area in the actual Crown building itself.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just add also, we should imagine that the vast majority of people attending the weddings would also take advantage of local accommodation. So with all of those being stationed so close by, and obviously then wanting to drink, we should imagine that they will leave their cars parked at those local holiday cottages and walk to the venue.
Okay.
There are 12 sources of accommodation, including ours, within a 200 metre of the pub itself.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Councillor Dale Rook, any questions or issues?
Yeah. The noise impact assessment, I think, is rather important. Without it, you won't be able to do a noise management plan to alleviate the concerns. Regardless of the comments of the environmental officer, surely a noise impact assessment would support or help support the application. And I can't understand why one hasn't been done.
As I said, we on the verbal phone call with Hugh Owens, he did say that an acoustic report would be needed, but he said if there's no point wasting the money when it's not going to give me what I need to be able to not have this objection. So we didn't want to spend the money when it seemed like it was hitting our head against a brick wall.
But then the noise management plan would mitigate any findings from the noise impact assessment. I just don't understand why it's not being done.
Okay, can I bring in
Moneydale?
Can I bring in Hugh Owen? Because obviously this is obviously very much in your sort of domain.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Councillor Rook and applicant. Yeah, just to be clear, whether or not there's been any miscommunication, but if I quote the penultimate paragraph of my comments dated the 5th of December, in my opinion, the application should be supported by an assessment of the noise impact of the proposals, in particular the matters I've identified above with regard to the nearby residential accommodation. Whether or not there's been any miscommunication, I would not say to any applicant where you can submit a noise impact assessment, but there's absolutely no way that that's going to be acceptable to us. I think the point that I do make very often is that there's a distinct difference between a noise management plan and a noise impact assessment. Sometimes only noise management plans are needed given the context, where properties are significant distance away. But in this case, my feelings are quite clear. A noise management plan needs to be informed by a noise impact assessment, because a noise impact assessment will look at the context and it will assess for nearby properties what the background levels are. It will consider what noise levels are needed for guest satisfaction, which of course you've clarified to some extent now today. So I just want to assure members that when we ask for a noise impact assessment, we don't prejudge those noise impact assessments. Clearly we've got an open mind to consider the observations and conclusions made in such a noise impact assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. So what you're saying is obviously you would be requesting a noise impact assessment, but that doesn't preempt, what the outcome of that assessment.
Yes, we don't
before
prejudge.
Having it.
Yeah, we don't prejudge, and obviously when we receive noise impact assessments, we consider them on the basis that we critically appraise them, of course, and make our conclusions accordingly. Okay, thanks. Any other questions before we come to the sort of final remarks? Anything?
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Horton have the hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Dale. It was really just to say that having heard what Nick and Amy have had to say by way of explanation, it's a shame that they couldn't have said that to us sooner, because we do feel reassured by their comments that the intended size of events is quite small. And Amy is also quite right in pointing out that were they put in a position where they had to use the front beer garden, it would, I'm pretty certain, be worse for us, because that is facing directly towards us. So from our point of view, we would actually be very happy to see them have a temporary license, and I understand what you've said about the issues with the temporary license, but some temporary a trial, I suppose, of the marquee on the back lawn, because as far as the other events and proposals for Christmas markets and so forth are concerned, we'd really support that. So yes, that's all we wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. and Mrs. Houghton. But can I clarify with you now? Are you, in a sense, after what you've heard from the applicants today, are you withdrawing that objection? Because that is important in terms of this committee making that making a decision today.
We would still support some kind of noise impact assessment, in the sense that we don't want to be put in a position where later we have to raise a complaint about noise. But our concerns are far less now than they were. So I suppose, yes, on balance, our objection is withdrawn.
So on balance, it is withdrawn, but you implying a proviso there that there is a noise impact assessment.
Well, I think there has to be,
yeah,
doesn't there?
It would be helpful for us.
Okay, thanks. Just taking legal advice now, I think it's difficult at this point, for you to withdraw it, because there hasn't been a noise impact assessment. So in a sense, you still have doubts about that, because you said you want that. So in effect, that we will have to take that objection into consideration. Okay. In terms now then of, we've looked at, obviously we've gone through the procedure. We've just got closing statements now, and I turn again to HIWO and EWO to give any final comment before we go to the other comments.
Thank you, Chair. No further comments from me.
Okay, and again, Mr. and Mrs. Houghton, is anything else you want to say? Are you quite happy with what you've given so far?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, and then we go to the applicant now to sum up their case.
Sorry.
Do you want to make any final sort of closing comments, just to sort of crystallise your application? Thanks.
Sorry, there was just something that I just wanted to raise based on something that was said earlier, just so that we've got complete clarification here. It's not ever going to be a permanent structure or for the marquee or something that's going to remain in place for a period of time. Sorry, I meant to comment on that earlier. So the idea being that every wedding would be bespoke, and then we've got a supplier that we go to that was tried and tested at our own wedding to erect a structure, and it would be up for a maximum of 3 days for the install prior, the day of the wedding, and then the taking it down the day after. So I think you made some reference to planning permission and all of that earlier, but that would not be something that would be required. I just wanted to clarify that.
And the company that we have tried and tested worked with, their marquees are acoustic lined marquees. So you can make sure that the opening is facing away from the buildings that would be a detriment from any noise.
Okay, so there's nothing else. And are you happy now that, obviously, I think the EWO, Hugh Owen, has clarified that he didn't preempt the outcome of the noise impact assessment? That, that is important, because obviously we appreciate, I think everybody would appreciate, there is a cost factor in having a noise impact assessment. So that, are you happy now that that is clear, that Hugh Owen did not imply that a decision has been made anyway before the noise impact assessment is made?
Apologies, I'm not in agreement there. I'm not trying to cause argument or debate, but the wording was, I can't remember how many years experience, I don't see how any assessment's going to give me, I can't remember what the wording was, but give me what he needs to not have an objection, and that's why we have been very reluctant to spend the money when we felt like it wasn't going to be have any bearing on the outcome.
Okay, any other comments from licensing or anybody in the meeting? People happy? We'll stop now and we'll go to a separate room and obviously make our deliberations, and then we'll come back and feedback the decision, and obviously with rationale and evidence, etc. Okay, thanks very much. We'll stop. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, welcome back. We've made deliberations now, and obviously with legal advice from Solicitor Julian Sanders. And our decision today is that based on the evidence that we have at the moment, that we actually adjourn this meeting until a noise impact assessment is made. Because the feeling, and this was unanimous in the committee, the three of us, after full discussion, and we are highly sympathetic, to your application, and to obviously the fact that your reputation and as it were good order, but reputation in the area is so high, but we just couldn't make that decision because it would be a permanent decision, and it's not a temporary license. You either grant it or you don't grant it, and we could not, on as it were, the hoof right in the proviso saying, well, we'll let it run for 6 months, and then if there are complaints, we'll stop it. Unfortunately, the system doesn't work like that. So we felt the fairest way forward was to actually adjourn and not to ask for another application until we have a noise impact assessment, and obviously there'd be a mitigation plan that would go with that, I assume, and then we could make a decision, because really we've been asked today to make a decision without clear, hard evidence. And if we allowed that licence, then there is a high risk of complaint from people living in that area. And I know you had some support for that, but obviously there are other people there who haven't made any comment. So that is the decision. We adjourn, have a request that you undertake a noise impact assessment, and then we would reconvene and make a decision then either to grant or not grant the licence. Okay, yeah.
Do you have a timeline of when you want this noise impact assessment in, and do you want it to also have a noise management plan along with the noise impact assessment?
I think in terms of the actual time scale, I think we would be quite flexible on that, in the sense that you're not going to be able to undertake that in say 5 days or whatever. So I don't want to put a time limit on that, but as a guideline, I would suggest perhaps a month as a guideline, but I wouldn't. Sorry, go to EWO. Thanks.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah, just to make the point that the noise impact assessment would probably need an assessment, in my view, would need an assessment of the existing background levels in the area. And so you will need some time, A, to approach an appropriate consultant, and B, to get the necessary weather conditions. You wouldn't want to do that, or the acoustic consultant wouldn't want to do background measurements in high wind when it appears a heavy rainfall and that sort of thing. So a month may be a little bit too tight for the applicants on that.
Yeah, I'd prefer, because obviously this costs money, so we'd probably need to see Easter revenue come in for us to be able to not have it affect our reserve capital. So
we would be flexible on that, and I think I would leave it to you as the applicants to liaise with licensing in terms of when you undertake that assessment. But I do think then on top of that, and a noise sort of whatever that study brings about, that assessment raises, I think we would want a noise management plan with that, so that then it could be brought back to the subcommittee at a suitable time, say you liaise with licensing, and then we could make a final decision. Okay. Anything else? Any other comment or thought? People happy with that? To say we discussed it at length, and it was unanimous, and I must admit I feel better. But thank you today for coming to this committee and obviously putting a very strong application, put it in a very eloquent way. So we certainly appreciated that. Okay, if there is nothing else, I declare this subcommittee meeting closed. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you.